Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Machette. Today's the astrology forecast for August 2026, and my guest and fellow astrologer and friend Justin Crockett Elzy is joining me today. Welcome, Justin. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited to talk about the crazy month we're about ready to have.
Fantastic. Here we go. Justin Crockett Elzy is an archetypal and Jyotish astrologer, teacher, author, and seer. The best way to contact Justin is through email at justin.lz@gmail.com. I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive, and the best way to reach me is through my website, alightpath.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. So we're in the month of August, Leo energy. It's a fixed modality, stable, persistent, about adventure and determination. Leo's the fire element, about stability, stick to it, ruled by the sun. And the mantra is I will. And Justin, will you share the keywords and caution with us?
Yeah, so some of the key words for Leo can be warm, generous, dramatic, confident, brave, also a sign of authority and leadership, and very creative, sign of creative types. And then the cautions would be, because it is a fire sign, there can be an ego thing that around focusing too much on self or how others are viewing oneself. And so then it also brings in a little bit of, because it is a fixed sign, it can be inflexible. Um, and of course, it's fire sign, it can be a little competitive, but a larger thing could be as a negativity is arrogance and opinionation, being opinionated. So just some cautions there, but a great month to focus on creativity.
Well, thank you very much. So, looking at the chart for August 1st, and it should be 2026, not 1016. I missed correcting that. In Seattle, Washington at 12 midnight. Um, so just kind of to show the energy of how we're entering into the month of August here on the west coast of the United States. We have the ascendant at 13 degrees Taurus, and the ruler is Venus in Virgo. The midheaven is at 20 degrees Capricorn and ruled by Saturn in Aries. The moon is at 9 degrees Pisces and is ruled by Jupiter in Leo. And the sun is at 9 degrees Leo and ruled by the sun in Leo. Is there anything you'd like to say about this chart?
Well, I was going to say, before we kind of jump into a couple of things, I was going to talk about, just mention something briefly about the energy of this month and get your thoughts on it, because, we're seeing a month where all the inner planets are changing signs, right? So if we look at the inner planet, so, Mercury is going to be in 3 signs this month: Cancer, um, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. And then, of course, Venus is changing signs from um, Virgo into Libra. Sun's changing signs, of course. So all the inner planets in this, so this, there is some shift in our inner world this month with this, and so I just wanted to kind of bring that out, that there's a lot going on this month, and with a lot of the focus, there'll be a Leo stellium this month as well. So it's a large focus on a shift this month and change. And something about Leo too that I think is really important to point out. I don't know if we've done it on the other shows, but Jupiter, we're going to be dealing with this Leo energy for for a year now, because Jupiter stays in a sign 12 to 13 months, and Jupiter moved into Leo June 30th, and it's going to be bringing in this Leo energy until July 26th of this next year. And so it's going to go forward, it's going to go retrograde, and it's going to go direct again forward. And I think we're really, because this month there is a solar eclipse that brings, that's touching on the Leo energy. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, in November we've got a big mashup between Mars and Jupiter, and south node, lunar south node, Ketu in Leo. So this is really this time where there's going to be a lot of focus on those key words we're talking about with Leo over the next year. So I just wanted to have your thoughts on the month before we dive into the details of it.
Well, and the inner planets are also referred to as the personal planets. And I always like to look at the moon sign, where it is when we enter a month or a year or a new season, and it's in Pisces. So, our feelings are trying to, share compassion and be compassionate with each other. And then the ascendant is a fixed sign of Taurus, and the midheaven is a cardinal sign of Capricorn. So, cardinal is generally about starting new things, but um, fixed signs are about doing the work to accomplish it. It's like they're
And start something new creativity wise. Um, and then of course we end that month with the lunar eclipse with the moon in Pisces and the sun in Virgo. So it's almost like there's something we're shown something later in the month that is very discerning to us and something to be somewhat aware of.
right. And since this month eclipses are going to occur, eclipses are, I always think of them as a pretty powerful energy. It's like mega super moons.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to look at the Sabian symbols for the sun and moon that we entered on August 1st to give us a little bit more background information of what um, the underlying current of August, some other information of what August might be about. The Sabian symbols were channeled in 1925 by Elsie Wheeler, and Mark Edmund Jones took the notes and assisted her. And there's one image or saying for each of the degrees of the zodiac, 360 degrees. So they call them pictures, but they're sayings that kind of create a picture. So we're going to look at the Sabian symbols for the sun, and the sun's at 9 degrees of Leo. So we're going to look at the degree before, the degree of, and the degree after, kind of, having a little picture or a little story there. So go ahead and start, Justin.
Yeah, so if we're looking at what the energy going into this sun as we're stepping into the month, Leo 8 degrees. The concept there is a communist activist or an activist, any type of activist, spreading their revolutionary ideals, and so it's sort of this Leo type of energy about an emotional and ideological attempt to return to some sense of non-differentiation and chaos as a prelude to a new type of order. So here we have the key phrase of catabolic action.
And then Leo 9, a glass blower shapes beautiful vases with their controlled breathing. The keynote is the need to involve one's most spiritual and vital energies in a creative act if it is to produce significant and beautiful new forms. Creative intensity.
And then where we're moving to with this sun for this month is the concept of, or a picture of, the early morning dew sparkles as sunlight floods the fields. And so here we have this exalted feeling that we're moving towards this month that rises from the soul of the individual, that we've passed through this dark night, and it really strengthens that's tested our strength and our faith. And so we have this keyword of transfiguration.
So, would you like to sum up these three or what it means to you?
Yeah, this is, again, this kind of speaks to what you and I were just talking about. What is this month about? Is with all this Leo energy, we see the shift with the inner planets, the personal planets, catabolic action and creative intensity. Great month, we said, to start something new, creative wise. And at the end of the day, after the eclipses, we go through some long night of the soul here in some way, and we are strengthened by the changes that we have to deal with.
Well, and it feels kind of like a turning point because, people want to have some kind of change, but it's like it's important to still have some creativity to your life to make those changes, I would say.
Yeah. And can I just bring in an aspect this month that we're going to talk about a little bit later that kind of, as we're talking about individuals here, later this month, as we know, we're going to talk about that the sun is going to square Uranus, right? Um, and because of the sun in Virgo and Uranus and Gemini. And when the sun squares Uranus, from my experience, it's this really strong restlessness to break out and strive for change. And I think this also plays out because this air trine in the chart we're going to talk about today, which is a we know we've been dealing for a while now, long term, with this trine between Uranus and Pluto in an air trine. And then, of course, now this month we are adding Venus to the mix. So that grand air trine. So it's about our desires for this need for change. And what's interesting is that when you look at the Sabian symbols of this air trine, it speaks to a need for change. And it's really sort of a mental change. And there's also, if we look at kind of how this is playing out in this political season, what the Sabian symbols speak to with those three planets, Venus, Uranus, and Pluto, is this sort of this desire for change, but it's very mental. And if people speak to that, to the collective, to what people want, then it'll happen. And it's about really connecting with people on a mental plane. And I think this also plays out with this, what we're talking about, this change of individual, or change that we're having going through right now. A lot of it's individual as well, because that sun is going to square Uranus. So there's an when the sun squares, when Virgo squares Gemini, in my experience, because I have two planets in my chart that do that, that it is this skeptical and analytical, but it's not negative. It can be a really good positive thing for change. So
Thank you for adding that. Okay, so we're going to look at the Sabian symbols for the moon and the degree before Pisces 8, a girl blowing a bugle, a call to participate in the service of the race as an evolutionary crisis approaches, summons men to rebirth.
and then the Pisces 9 degrees, the concept of vision here we have, or the tarot card, if you want to say that symbol, is a jockey spurs his horse intent on outdistancing his rivals. This means there's this intense mobilization of energy this month and skill for drive for success in any performance, that Leo aspect affected by the competitive spirit. So we see a self-quickening this month of energy.
And then Pisces 10, an aviator pursues his journey, flying through ground obscuring clouds. Man's ability to develop power and skills which, by transcending natural limitations, allow him to operate in a mental spiritual realm. And the key word is mastery. So, how would you sum these ones up, Justin?
So again, back to what we're just talking about, we see the same things here. A quickening of energy this month, because all the inner planets, the personal planets, especially Mercury. There is no Mercury retrograde this month, folks. So great for that. But Mercury moves through really fast through three signs this month. It finishes up and then moves on into Leo, and so it's going to go through three signs this month. And so we see that self-quickening, but then also this mastery. We were just talking about the mental realms. So this is a month where people are going to be more likely to take risks a little bit because of this, and we're being summoned to make changes right now and step up for transformation, I think.
Right. And to me, it reminds me of it's still talking about change. And then basically a call to action, it's like take action and maybe develop your skills that you have, or just acknowledge the skills that you have, and use those to move forward.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
Okay, so planets out of bounds are any planet's declination that exceeds 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south. And this month we have the moon out of bounds from August 7th through the 11th and the 20th to the 25th. Mars will be out of bounds from August 3rd through the 28th for 25 days. And Pluto will be out of bounds August 12th through December 10th for 120 days. And when it's out of the bounds, it's out of the bounds of the sun. So the sun isn't, basically they're not having to communicate or go under the sun's rule. So they act, the planet acts more on its own or out of character, or, um, you could say it's a bratty little 2-year-old, perhaps. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Justin?
Sure. I think, and again, I'm going to bring in some aspects that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But what really jumps out to me, because we don't talk about Mars being out of bounds that often. Usually it's always the moon a lot every month at some point. But Mars in this month, in the first part, is in the first degrees of Cancer after it moves into Cancer. And those first degrees of Cancer always speak to this um, about grounding one's emotions, reorientating one's emotions, but also being cautious of emotional rationalization of things. And that's something I was going to talk about a little bit later. That Mars, when it's going to square Neptune here this month, is in a point where there's a higher likelihood of that we're could because Neptune can represent illusions, right? And so I think with Mars being out of grounds, there's a higher chance this month, of propensity for people um, to make emotional rationalizations towards any action that they're taking. So I think it gives us something to caution about when Mars is out of bounds, because that means people are going to take action that's kind of over the top or not normal. And so there's just a caution there with that, just like we normally would with the moon. But that's something I just wanted to point out. I thought was interesting.
Well, and the moon will go out of bounds on a fairly regular basis for, I can't remember the cycle, but I want to say it's 7 to 10 years, and then it rarely goes out of bounds for another 7 to 10 years. And Mars only goes out of bounds about once every 2 years. And I don't remember the cycle for Pluto, but it's more rare, but it will be going out of bounds once a year for the next 2 or 3 years. So, and that doesn't always go out of bounds. And Saturn never goes out of bounds. So,
And it's interesting when you talk about Pluto, because there's a major transit over um, the US's Pluto during this time period of out of bounds
yes.
in Aquarius. So it's buckle up and hold on to your seats with Pluto out of bounds.
Okay, planets moving into new signs for the month of August. On the 6th, we have Venus moves into Libra. On the 9th, Mercury moves into Leo. On the 11th, Mars moves into Cancer. On the 12th, Ceres moves into Cancer. On the 22nd, the Sun moves into Virgo. And on the 25th, Mercury moves into Virgo. And then Justin's going to talk about the planetary themes for the month of August. Go ahead, Justin.
So as a next step, we just talked about what the planets were ingressing into this month, and so I always like to kind of describe what kind of energy that is before we start looking at the chart. So, as you just were talking about, that Mercury is currently in Cancer, but it'll move into Leo, and then into Virgo. So goes through 3 signs this month. So there'll be the way we communicate and way we think can be very emotional and warmth, but also discerning and critical. So there is some things that we'll talk about with aspects with Mercury where we may need to kind of watch our communications this month. But in generally, people are going to be very self-expressive and warm and emotional this month with a little bit of discernment. And that's what Mercury and Virgo is about, discernment and being the critic. Venus, of course, our desires is in 2 signs this month, in Virgo, and then it'll move into Libra. So from a earth sign to a air sign. And of course, Venus is domicile is Libra, so that's very positive. So it's going to our desires this month. Venus is going to act very matter of factly, but also can be very charming and social when it's in Libra and striving for balance with our desires. And this is important because it'll be opposite opposing Saturn at some point. So that'll be interesting to talk about that. And then Mars, of course, moves from Gemini into Cancer. So when Mars is in Gemini, it's like it needs mental stimulation, very verbal. And then it's moving into a more internally focused Mars a little bit here. It'll be emotional and intuitive. And of course, this all relates to our effort and outward effort. Jupiter, of course, still in Leo, has been in Leo since June, will be in Leo through next year. And so we're dealing with this year-long period of creativity, people being dramatic, but also having a lot of fun and generosity. And it really relates to our growth and expansion, and Jupiter does. And then, of course, Saturn has been in Aries for a while now. And it's about discipline. And when it's in Aries, there's an assertive identity thing going on with that. So
Thanks for sharing that with us, Justin. So planets stationing retrograde or direct this month. We have 3 planets going retrograde. On the 3rd, we have Chiron stationing retrograde in Taurus. On the 14th, Pallas Athena, which is an asteroid goddess, stations retrograde in Aries. And on the 25th, Vesta, also an asteroid, is stations retrograde in Aries. And I will be back with a show on the planet stationing with the Astrology Star Sisters probably in a week or so. So I look forward to having everybody join us for that. Anything you'd like to say about the planet stationing?
no, you're the asteroid expert with those those goddess
So
asteroids.
a lot, like Justin said, there's quite a bit going on this month. So from August 1st to the 10th, on the 3rd, Chiron stations retrograde. On the 6th, Venus enters Libra and the sun is trine Saturn. On the 7th, Venus is quincunx Chiron. On the 9th, Mercury enters Leo and Mercury is square Chiron. On the 10th, Venus is trine to Pluto and opposite Neptune. And then I'm going to leave the last one until we kind of talk about the aspects, and then I'll talk about the last one with the asterisks there.
Okay, cool. Do you want me to tell you what I think about this
Yeah.
first week?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what really jumps out to me that I want to kind of bring to people's attention is the sun trining Saturn. And because the sun is in Leo and Saturn's in Aries, there's actually going to be an exact trine at 14 degrees with these 2 planets this month. And so this is an easy flow of really strong fire energy this month. And I think that's can be a positive thing towards starting new creative projects. And then also for leaders that we may see in the collective some really a lot going on with leaders when Jupiter's in Leo. But now that we've got also the sun there, and Saturn also has an aspect of authority, a lot going on that we're going to see with leaders this month, and maybe even some rising and some falling from grace, as we were talking before. And the other one that got me was of course, Mercury moves into Leo, and when Mercury's in Leo, it's very spontaneous. It can be overwhelmed with possibilities, but it squares Chiron. So I think this really speaks to how we're talking to others this month about trauma, and it's good month to heal with Mercury squaring Chiron, and a lot of our wounds could come up because of that. So again, it just really, I think, really speaks to how we're communicating this month and how the importance of that is.
Well, I think that's really important, to speak with kindness and care, and a great opportunity to accomplish some healing for yourself and maybe even other people. And
Yeah.
then I wanted to talk about the Venus opposite Neptune. So, Venus is our desires, and Neptune's can be some of our dreams, but it can also be foggy. So it's like there you might want to move forward on something, but maybe you don't have the complete picture yet, or it's a little foggy. And so it's like maybe work on bringing that more into focus. And like Justin said, Venus will be opposite Saturn, I think the following week. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, so I'm going to go back to the air grand trine. So this week, or this 10-day period leading into the next period that I'm going to show on the next one, we have an air grand trine and a mystic rectangle, but there wasn't room on the other slide to put all the information, so I put it here just to get things in. So we might want to just talk about the air grand trine and the mystic rectangle first on this next slide, and then we'll go into all the aspects. How's that?
Sure. So I'll let you talk about the mystic rectangle because you're the expert on those. But I like this air grand trine. This way we were talking about before that, this is really bringing in this very mental period and communicative period. And I think because Venus comes into play, um, Venus, in my experience in Libra, can be very charming, but really striving for balance and our and harmony in relationships. And so this can be a period when we, really expand our relationships because Pluto and Uranus are involved, but also it can be a time when we go back to school, and it's a really big mental flowing period towards what our desires are. Now you mentioned that it's opposite Neptune there. So again, with this mental thing going on this month, I think when you point out something very important that there could be again what when we were talking about you and I did the show on the ingress of the nodes. There is something about um, knowing or being aware of ego illusions with Leo and Aquarius. And I think that's, the Venus opposite Pluto. And then again, a little bit in a couple of weeks will be Mars squaring Neptune, that there is this um, discernment this month that we're supposed to really work through with not being carried away by our illusions or fantasies here, and what those desires are and what action we need to take, as you just mentioned a minute ago with the Venus opposite Neptune. So I think it's just really a month where we're being called to be more discerning about our desires there.
Well, and this air grand trine works into two kites. So the focal or the release points would be Mercury and Jupiter in Leo, and then Neptune in Aries. So that's really interesting that this air grand trine has all these other energies attached to it to work through that energy and help assist it. So it's like a lot of participation. And
Yep.
and Juno is very close to Pluto, so it's like we have several points involved in the grand trine, which makes two kites.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, now I'm going to speak to the mystic rectangle because some of it kind of was active in the period before and then active this period. So, and that is made up of two sextiles and two trines that all connect into making a rectangle. So we have Mercury, Jupiter, sextile Venus, Venus, trine, Juno, Pluto, and that's sextile to Neptune. And then Neptune is trine back to that Mercury, Jupiter. So I always think of mystical rectangles as that there's gifts there and work to be done. And if you have that energy to assist you, so whatever you're putting into action, whatever efforts you make will have good rewards. But it's not like the mystic rectangle isn't just a gift that's given to you. I always think of that there's some work to accomplish to get to those in that treasure chest, so to speak. Do you want to add anything?
Awesome. Yeah. No, the only thing I would add, I like that, and it's part of that mystic rectangle is that Mercury Jupiter conjunction there, because that is super, super brainstorming. That's like Jupiter and Leo magnifying Mercury and Leo is like too many ideas and being overwhelmed by them. So it's a really this is a really great month to work on creative projects because of that conjunction of Mercury and Jupiter and Leo.
Well, now I'm going to tell you about all the aspects, and then we can look at other aspects if we want to talk about those. So on the
Yeah.
11th, Mars entered Cancer, Mercury is opposite Pluto, and Mercury is trine Neptune. Venus is trine Uranus. So, a lot of aspects on the 11th, kind of a busy day. The 12th, we have Mars sextile Chiron, Mercury sextile Uranus, the Leo new moon eclipse. So it's a solar eclipse, and Ceres ingresses into Cancer. So another really busy day. The 13th, Mercury is sextile to Venus. The 15th, Mercury conjoins Jupiter, which Justin was just talking about. The 16th, Mars is quincunx Pluto. The 17th, Mars is square Neptune, which Justin was telling us a little bit ago that was coming up. Mercury trine Saturn and Venus sextile Jupiter. So is there any more of those aspects that you'd like to talk about? Because it's active.
Right, right. Well, there is a couple that I think jump out to me. And I'd be curious what ones jump out to you. Mine would be um, Mercury trining Saturn, so that'll bring in a little bit of a seriousness in our thinking, uh, because Saturn being in Aries and Mercury being in Leo, that's definitely a time to watch anger or frustration in our communications, but also very serious communications. Maybe you may feel a little bit more stern or serious about communications. A very powerful time to put out a communication if you're in that type of field. The other thing I wanted to point out was the Mars quincunx Pluto, because quincunxes represent some imbalance there a little bit. So I think again this lends into, with Mars moving into Cancer, which has the strong need to nurture something, and assertive nurture, that um, this again could be some imbalance in changes that are outside our control, and some of our emotions and how we're asserting our emotions may come into play. But it may also be a change in how we're nurturing something in our lives. So if we're a caregiver, there's going to probably be some changes to our caregiving or what we're nurturing at this point in our life, with that quincunx between Mars and Pluto. So what jumps out to you during this week, this busy week?
Well, I just say changes afloat and hang on. And, um, you know, like you said about the Mercury trine Saturn, a lot of good communication could happen. But if you're angry or upset, it's like wait 5 minutes, or, maybe that's not the best time to communicate. It's like, try to calm yourself down and then communicate. I think that would be a little bit more fulfilling and you'd accomplish so much more. Um,
Yeah.
I think we talked about quite a few of the things already. So I'm ready to move on to the next slide if
Yep.
you are.
I am. Let's go.
Okay, so the Leo new moon solar eclipse at 20 degrees Leo in 2 minutes, for the West Coast here on August 12th at 10:37 a.m. And it'll be in the 11th house, that new moon. So, and I know that I forgot to look up the shadow, but I heard it was going to be like in northern Russia or something like that. Real far north is what I remember.
Right.
And the aspects, we have the moon trine Saturn, Pallas Athena, and Eris, and sesquiquadrate Neptune, which is a 135-degree angle, and then a semi-square to Venus. I know that that one's a real minor one, but I put it in there anyway, just in case we wanted to talk about it. We don't have to, but we can. So go ahead, Justin.
Well, I really like how you put Eris here. This is something that's kind of under the radar a little bit this month, is Eris and how it's playing a role, because it is in those degrees of Aries where it has really got several aspects during the month. Eris does in Aries, and as Eris is that strong, can be some strife, but very strong aspect, and it is playing a role with Chiron going retrograde there, and with Vesta. I think it's just something to pay attention to again of how we're communicating this month, and again, a good month to work on trauma and our wounds.
Yeah, and Pallas Athena will be going retrograde later in the month too, and um, that trine to the moon to, it's not it's in range of Saturn, so, the rules and regulations, and then Pallas Athena is our wisdom and using a strategy, and then Eris, she wants fairness and equality, and, you could stretch and even add Vesta in there actually because it's since it's close to the next planet or planetoid, it's like pulling Vesta in there too, and that's about our hearth and home. And it's like they wanna work cooperatively, um, but how do you do that? It's like when we have an eclipse, that energy can shift on a dime. So, um, I would say breathe and just, stay in control of yourself if you can.
And I agree. I agree with everything you're saying there. I love how you what you put Eris there, because I was thinking that before we did the show. I wonder if she's got Eris on the slide. Um, because this is a point where it's a bigger event for the collective. I think what jumps out to me too here is that sesquadrate with Neptune, since Neptune represents the collective unconsciousness, that and so it jumps out to me as to how the moon and the sun, as the sun is blanked out and then turned back on again, basically, how that may affect the collective. And I'd just be curious what you think about that sesquadrate with Neptune there with the sun and moon. What in your experience, what does that relate
Well, I'd
with us?
say it's like if you have a dream or a vision or a desire that it either needs some adjustment or reworking, or maybe you need to just put it aside and come up with a whole new one.
Ah, cool.
There's an adjustment and change, that's what I would say.
Awesome.
Okay, so the last part of the month, August 21st through the 31st, calms down a bit. Just a bit, because there's still another eclipse. On the 21st, Venus is opposite Saturn. On the 22nd, the Sun enters Virgo. On the 23rd, Sun is trine Chiron. On the 25th, Mercury enters Virgo and Mercury is trine Chiron. And Pallas Athena stations retrograde. On the 27th, we have a lunar full moon eclipse in Pisces. On the 28th, Mercury and Sun square Uranus. And on the 31st, Jupiter is trine Saturn. So, what jumps out at you, Justin?
Well, a couple of things here, Liz. Of course, the Venus Saturn opposition between Aries and Libra. I think, just on its face, no matter what sign you're in, the Venus Saturn um, kind of, when we look at in the Jyotish astrology, when people are in dasha periods or planetary periods that are, let's say, Venus or Saturn, and the sub dasha is Venus or Saturn, then there's something a theme around what one's desires are, but also some discipline with one's desires, because as we know, Saturn can represent karma, discipline, and obstacles, or having to work harder for something. So this could mean where we are in a more serious thing with our desires, where we're being called to be more disciplined with our money, or something that we, whatever our desires are, we may have to be a little bit more disciplined, and they may not come as easy. And so we're having to work a little bit harder for what we desire, but also discernment about what really has value there, because Venus is involved, right? And also, I think this can also relate to ourself and relationships, and what we desire in relationships, and what we desire for ourselves. So I guess we need to talk out that this month in our relationships, what each needs and desires, and work through any obstacles there. So that jumped out to me. The other thing was the Jupiter trine Saturn. This is a very good aspect, can be good, and actually, there's going to be a couple more times over the course of the year where they will actually trine exact again over the next year. Jupiter and Saturn does, because they stay in Leo and Aries up until, Jupiter until next July of next year. But this can be a very good aspect in my experience of drive and success, because Jupiter is a planet of good fortune with um, doing individual projects, good for leaders in government. And so that's just something that really jumped out to me, because it's an important trine there. What jumps up to you about this chart?
Well, I like the Sun and the Mercury trine Chiron because to me that's just another opportunity to do some inner healing and help others heal. And then the Uranus square the Sun, I would say some change in communication. And here on the West Coast, it's in the house of communication. And then the Sun's in the seventh house of relationships. So some, good communication will help assist relationships, perhaps.
Awesome.
Anything else
There's
you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would say, and I mentioned earlier about the Sun Uranus. So I think this is on an individual level. Also, I agree with you about the relationships, because the seventh house and communications, they're definitely how we're communicating. And I think this is also going to drive um, individuals to make changes, personal changes. This is a time when the universe is saying, okay, I'm going to align these planets. There's this good energy if you want to make personal changes in your life, because Uranus is really about rebellion, revolution, and change. And Sun represents the individual. And especially if you're a Virgo, I think it could be a little bit stronger there.
Right, and it's an opportunity whether you take it or not, it's your choice, so I hope,
Yeah.
you all take the opportunity. Okay, and then we're gonna look at that Pisces full moon lunar eclipse at 4 degrees Pisces in 54 minutes on the August 27th at 9:19 PM. The moon is conjunct the north node, square Uranus forming a T-square, trine Mars and Ceres, sesquiquadrate Venus, and semi-square Pallas Athena. So what jumps out at you, Justin?
Well, I think just one thing I would just mention, because as we know, lunar eclipse is where the Earth shadow shines on the moon, and the sun's helping shine that light on that, right? And so I think this is a time, uh, really, with this full moon lunar eclipse, where we could really be shown what that thing is that we need to change in ourselves. Because Uranus is, we just talked about that, squaring the sun, and now the moon is there as the project, as the Earth's shadow, or that sun's shadow is, the sun with the light is shining the Earth's shadow onto the moon. I think it really shows us that's a really important moon for self work and self change.
I would agree with that so much. And then that T square with Uranus, because we kind of talked about that Sun Uranus square. And so here it is active with the south node, the Sun, and Mercury. So, communicating, whether that's journaling or seeking counseling or whatever that might be, it's, opportunities for sure to make positive changes.
I agree. And, I would say you brought up a good point there. It's right there with the nodes, of course, because it is an eclipse. So people can go back and watch our show about the nodes, and that'll give them more information about what some of that energy is coming in with the sun and moon based on the nodes in those signs.
And Justin and I will be back um, later in the month to do the full moon lunar eclipse show. So we look forward to seeing you then. Do you want to say anything about that Mars trine the moon in North Node?
Well, again, it's interesting. That's kind of the easy flow of emotional energy, right? So, I think it's really caution about um, emotional rationalization of certain things, and just grounding our emotions on that. I think it's a good time to work with emotions on this full moon.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or you're good?
No. How about you? Anything else?
Well, we're gonna do favorable activities, Justin, and Justin
Okay.
did this for us, so I'm gonna let him lead us through this.
Yeah, so based on the lunar mansions that comes in from the Vedic or Jyotish astrology, the sun this month goes through actually four lunar mansions because it's in the fourth pada or the fourth section, the last section of Pusha, and then of course all through Ashalesha, and then all through Maga, and then all through Purva Falguni. Now, interestingly, to kind of tell you a little bit about the energy that this also kind of is an overlay of the energy that the sun is having this month and are expressing. And the deities that are a part of these, there's Bhaga, who is with Purva Falguni. And so this is the deity that deals with contracts and unions. So this is a good month for contracts and unions. Also, Maga is ruled by the Pitris, which is the ancestors. So any type of focusing on the family and those who have passed on, we're getting help from them. And then, of course, Ashalesha is the energy coming from the deified serpent kingdom and the spirits. And so this is a good month also for some transformation and getting rid of stuff within ourselves. Like we're talking about trauma and healing this month with the Nagas and Ashalesha. And then, of course, Pusha is ruled by Brisapati, which is the Jupiterian energy, energy of the Lord of Speech and mantras. So some of the activities, of course, we couldn't list them all here, but some good activities this month is if honoring our ancestors, however you do that. If you have a picture on your home altar with your loved ones who've crossed over, and working on any genealogy. Any career strategies is really good during this period, of course, because of the Leo energy with Jupiter. Travel, amusement, and public performances, travel, and dance and gambling also, because that's ruled by Leo, and the fifth house, of course, gambling. And then, of course, romance, marriage, and weddings is really good with this energy. And now, especially with Venus moving into Libra, good time for marriages when it's in that sign. And then, of course, creative gardening or cooking. These are just a few of the positive, favorable activities during this month. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it really well. Thank you for sharing all that. And then do we have okay, so then we're at the end here. And Justin, I want to thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank our audience for watching live, and our audience that comes back at watches at a future date. We appreciate you. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And Justin and I both do in-person and Zoom consultations, and we have YouTube channels and newsletters. So contact us, and you can be put on those. And we appreciate you. And then Justin, you can talk about your slide here.
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me is through my website on YouTube. It's Astrological Yogi on my YouTube channel, and my email is also there in the description on my YouTube channel, how to get a hold of me. And if you're in the Seattle or Olympic Peninsula area, I do write a weekly horoscope for the Port Townsend Leader newspaper.
Perfect. And then there's lots of shows in the archives, and usually a show or two each week. So we look forward to having you back on and watching us, and you, Justin, joining me. And then I want to thank our sponsor, Astro Peregrine, an astrology software for Mac and Windows. And you can find out more information at astroperegrine.com. Thanks again, Justin, for being here today. And I look forward to having you on again soon. So we're going to say
You.
goodbye for now, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, Justin.
Bye.